Alright guys, so I stumbled across this story out of Guam, actually, that made me chuckle, okay? Because it's funny, but it's not really funny, because it's one of those things that we all have been predicting what would happen if you just let biological males compete against biological women in sports. And we all know the logical conclusion of what would happen from a competitive standpoint, right? So when we're talking about winners and losers and how you're gonna have these biological males are gonna have a significant advantage over these biological women, they're gonna tend to place better, okay, if not outright dominate the competition. But something that's been overlooked, okay, is what happens when biological males compete against biological women in contact sports and the consequences of that. And this story out of Guam shows us exactly what happens, okay? And nobody should be surprised. As a rugby coach at a local high school there, is livid and is actually calling for a ban of transgender males, that's the way he frames it, from competing against biological women in rugby after 3 biological women were injured, right? Apparently by the transgender player while playing rugby with them. Take a look.
Hafa day and good evening, everyone. I'm Hannah Devonzo, and thanks for tuning in to your news leader. It's an issue that's been making national headlines. Should transgender athletes be allowed to play women's sports? The issue arose right here on Guam over the weekend as Guam's High School Rugby League kicked off another season, and concerns surfaced from families as well as both coaches and players about a transgender competitor from the home of the Panthers. With tonight's top story, here's KUAM's Isaiah Uggan.
3 Tiyan high school female rugby athletes were physically injured Saturday by a transgender player from Guam High. In light of the incident, Conrad Kerber, the head coach for both Tiyan boys and girls rugby teams, is calling out the league to address the concerns.
The aggressive nature that was witnessed clearly showed that it's a definite issue that we have to deal with. I had 3 players that were injured in that first game against Guam High, directly by that particular player. Right now, we just have to come together as a group and discuss the proper path to take, discuss what the parameters are with allowing transgender males in full contact sports such as rugby.
Although no official decision has been made and while discussions are ongoing, Kerber hopes the league will adopt the World Rugby Law Transgender Guideline, which states that transgender women may not currently play women's rugby because of the size, force, and power-producing advantages conferred by testosterone during puberty and adolescence, and the resultant player welfare risks serious injuries.
Body size, body strength, and the ability to apply force with that size and strength completely dominate any girl that I have on my team.
The Academy of Our Lady of Guam's rugby team coaches unanimously agreed to enforce this rule over the weekend. Aiming to follow the footsteps of the home of the Cougars, Kerber says it's a matter of safety for his female athletes.
It's purely a safety issue when we discuss transgender males playing in female sports at a youth level, particularly at this type of contact sport as well. And I'm basically in line with the World Rugby guidelines regarding transgender females, transgender males, I should say, playing female sports. And basically, across the world, it's not permitted.
To prevent any serious injuries throughout the season, Kerber stated the World Rugby Law should be acknowledged on Guam.
It has to do purely with the size, force, strength disadvantage that transgender males will have over females in this type of sport.
There is no policy in place currently for outdoor leagues that bans the participation of transgender women in rugby.
My players will get through it, we'll heal, we'll use this next 2 weeks. We're lucky that we actually have a bye weekend so that we can heal properly.
Guam Rugby Football Union and Interscholastic Sports Association discussions are ongoing. KUAM News has reached out to Guam High coach Joe Mancuso and did not respond as of news time. Reporting for KUAM News, Guahusi Isaiah Uggan.
Yeah, so that coach sounds livid. And quite honestly, I would be livid as well, too. If I was competing, right, my team was competing against another team and they had a biological male on the team, and then 3 of my young girls, high school girls, got injured, right, by that one player. Okay, I'll be so heated, right? So heated that, yeah, I'm going to call for a ban. Because obviously, it seems like there is an increased risk of danger for these high school girls to compete against these biological boys in a contact sport like rugby, right? A sport in which you are tackling people to the ground, right? You're actively trying to use contact and force against other people. And again, you know, it's funny because if this coach actually spoke out in America, he'd be called a transphobe, right? He'd be shunned and fired from his job. I hope it's not the same in Guam, right? I hope it's not the same in Guam. I don't know what it's like over there in Guam, okay? Maybe it's Americanized, maybe it's not. But, yeah, hopefully the man's not going to lose his job for sticking up for his high school girls, okay? But, again, you can file this under the this is what's going to happen. It's predictable. This is what everybody with some common sense in the U.S. Has been talking about. This is what we've been warning about in terms of what would happen if you just let this happen, okay? If you just let biological boys compete against biological girls in sports. Again, that extends to also contact sports, okay? When you talk about contact sports, there are significant advantages that biological males have over biological females. It is what it is. It is what it is. And the result of that is somebody getting hurt. Now, the naysayers, the people who are against women's rights, that are against women's sports, would say, well, you know, anytime women get out on the field, they have a chance to get injured, right? How do we know it was just because of the transgender athlete? You're being transphobic. Well, my response to that would be, my argument is that, yes, girls do take a chance when they step out there on the field, regardless of if they're competing against biological women or biological men. However, regardless of whether or not they're competing against biological girls or biological boys, however, there's an increased risk, an unnecessary risk of them getting injured from competing against biological boys, okay? Because of all the things that that coach outlined, right? And evidenced by the fact that literally 3 high school girls got injured by this player, transgender player, allegedly, right? I don't think that that's a coincidence. I don't think that's a coincidence. But apparently, you are a transphobe if you don't want to see that happen. If you don't want to see high school girls get hurt by biological boys, right? Apparently you're a transphobe if you're against that. If you don't want to see that happen, okay? Now, the answer to this question in regards to solving this problem is easy. We all know what it is. All the girls got to do is just refuse to play. All I got to do is just say, hey, we're not playing. If we have to compete against biological boys, we simply will not play. And that's it. And we know it works. Look what happened over there in the UK when it comes to the British cyclist, Emily Bridges, who is a transgender woman or a transgender male, however you want to frame it, that was trying to compete against biological women. The biological women said, you know what? We're just not going to compete, right? We're going to boycott if this person is allowed to compete against us. And the cycling authority was like, well, you got us, right? You got us. I guess we got to ban this person from competing. It's really that simple. It's really that simple, okay? And that is what should have happened during the NCAA Women's National Championship for swimming, right, with Leah Thomas. All the women there should have said, you know what, we're just not going to compete. That's it. And what would have happened was that Leah Thomas would have been banned and the competition would have been fair. And some other young lady that deserved a spot to be in that championship to compete would have got an opportunity. And none of them would have been canceled, right? They're not going to be canceled because guess what? The company or the entity that tries to cancel them, we're going to say they're against women's rights, right? We're going to call them sexist, right? They're actually misogynist. That's all you got to do. Use the left's tactics against them. It's really that simple. All this fear of being canceled, in my opinion, is bunk, right? Because they told us so long about women's rights, women's power, right? Women's empowerment. And I can't think of anything that's more empowering to women than having them stand up against biological males, competing against them in their sports, dominating their sports. And any woke company or person that disagrees with that, they're sexist. They're misogynist, right? They're against women's rights. That's how you got to frame it. It's really that simple. It's really that simple. So that's what these rugby players should do. They say, hey, we just refuse to compete, period. And what will happen is that they'll fold, right? You just won't have any rugby. That's what you got to do. Because it's about the safety of these young girls, especially when it comes to contact sports like this, okay? These girls are not safe playing against biological males. They're just not, okay? It's an unfair disadvantage. It's too much. It's like competing against a girl taking steroids in high school. It's no different. It's the same thing. Again, I'm not against transgender people being able to compete in sports. They got to compete amongst themselves or based off their biological sex, okay? And they can't be taking any hormones or anything like that that gives them an advantage, competing against their biological sex. Those are my only stipulations. Now, if they want to compete amongst each other, they can take whatever hormones they want to take, right? I don't care. But it's either that or biology. Compete based off your biology. It's really that simple. That solves all these problems, okay? But yeah, we don't live in a world where common sense solutions are all that common. So let me know what you guys think. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Most importantly, share a Black conservative perspective. Peace.